Thank you for being here at our final, our final daytime program today. If you look in your program, you will see this evening we have a conversation at the Dreamland Theater beginning at 7 p.m. with Jason Reynolds and Carl Hyacin. And before that, we will be honoring our Young Writer Award winners and finalists, along with our Theron Dunn Scholarship winner. These are really important scholarships and awards that we give out as partnership with our local school systems and work closely, with teachers and students throughout the year to put these programs and these awards are through lines with all of the school programming that we do throughout the year. And so our students would be honored to have you there. Excuse me. I don't have my water. Frog in my throat. All right.
Much more important.
Thank you, Michael. I'll get you a fresh one.
The reset is crucial.
Thank you. Too much talking. Thank you, Michael.
Sure.
Okay. So please join us this evening at 7 p.m. at the Dreamland. And then tomorrow, the rest of our programming will also be in the Dreamland beginning at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, and we look forward to seeing you there. So for our final daytime event, once more I want to thank the White Elephant, thank the Boston Globe, thank our major donors, Mary and Robert Haft, Elizabeth Galvin, Richie Battle, and Nancy Seaman and Alan Schwartz. Thank you for making this weekend possible. All right, on the stage with me, I have our incredible guest, Loretta Ross, who I will let Michael do a proper introduction for. But Michael Schulder is a board member of the Nantucket Book Foundation. He is also a network news veteran and the creator and host of Wave Maker Conversations. His guests have included historians and historic figures, athletes and coaches, political analysts and performing artists, leaders in journalism, conflict resolution, mental health, and more. His journalism career has included 5 years as a writer for Peter Jennings at ABC World News Tonight and 17 years as a senior executive producer and on-air essayist at CNN. So Michael is the perfect person to be in conversation today with Loretta Ross, and I will let Michael take it away. Thank you.
I have been so excited to speak to you again. We spoke together about 4 years ago or so. I think it was after you won the MacArthur Genius Grant, or was it right before?
Honey, yeah. Wait, you're asking a boomer to remember stuff. No, I had a really good time in the 60s, and that's all I'm gonna say, okay?
Well, we might go back to the 60s on this.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, before I even introduce Loretta, we know what the title of her book is, but I'm gonna say it because the subtitle is really crucial. So it's Calling In, How to Start Making Change. I'm gonna emphasize the word start, because this process, it's not a one-shot deal, right?
Right.
I internalized it. How to start making change with those you'd rather cancel. And before we even started, a young woman came up to me, like, literally 2 minutes ago, do you mind telling the audience that we're having a No Kings protest at 5 p.m. at Children's Beach? As a journalist, I would never promote that. And I'm not going to promote it. So if you want to go, you can go. But this is the perfect, maybe, way to start before we start, because there are people who would cancel someone on campus if they spoke out against the All Kings protest, or would there be? By the way, Loretta Smith, associate professor at Smith College, they brought you there because they and every other campus has an issue with cancel culture and has for quite a while. And there are cancel culture issues in every pocket, the right to the left. But you have a life story, so you have developed this technique through hard-won life experience, and we are going to get into your life experience. You've developed this technique that is not just theoretical, because you have tried to make change with people that most of us would never go near. But why don't we start with the current situation, the situation on campus, and what you're experiencing, and why you got into this calling in approach.
Well, I'm kind of like an accidental writer. of this topic because I had no intention of writing about the cancel culture until I got on the internet. And I actually like blaming my grandson because he was at that age when grandma called, he'd let it go to voicemail. And when I finally got hold of him, I kind of jerked him up. I'm saying, listen, kid, you're my only heir. If you don't put a ring on that phone for grandma, you realize your grandma likes a lot of causes, right? And he said, oh, grandma, just get on Facebook. That's the way to reach me. Y'all know what happened when I got on Facebook. He migrated off to tic-tac-toe or whatever. Because he said it was for old folks. And he was right. But I stayed on Facebook. And once I did, I saw how unbelievably mean people were to each other. And I became convinced that people were using the anonymity of Facebook to say stuff they didn't have the courage to say to people's faces. And so I asked the young person, what is going on? Because I don't, he was the only reason I was into social media.
By the way, how old was your grandson at this time?
Well, now he's 29. But at the time, 10 years ago, he was 19. And so I'm still not into social media. Facebook is the only social media I use, and I'm a lurker. I don't even post, I just watch everybody else's crap. I don't want to reveal myself. But anyway, I asked the young person, what is this phenomenon? And she said, you mean the call-out culture? And my response to her was, y'all named it? And I thought maybe, it was just a fad that I just didn't know about. And so then I asked her, well, what are y'all doing about it? And she just shrugged and walked away, like it was as inevitable as gravity.
Who was she? Who was this person?
Her name was Marissa Gracioso.
You remember her name? How did you meet her?
We were working on a project together to honor Gloria Steinem.
Okay.
And so at the time, Marissa was working for Planned Parenthood.
So once you learned what call-out culture was, you write in the book that you, at one point, would consider yourself a call-out queen.
Oh, yeah, because I love using my voice and my so-called intellect to chew people up. I love it. I'm really good at it. Really, really good at it.
I'm just curious. Just curious. We all are. Have you had any good meals lately?
Oh, actually, I had something that gave me indigestion.
What was that?
I'm working with a person. We're presenting in a workshop next week. And this person is very white male-ish and very pushy. And the third time I tried to engage with him for planning this workshop, I just lost my cool. And I literally called him out because I'm like, wait a moment, kid. I don't need you taking the stuff from my book, branding it as yours, and then not letting me get a word in, which is basically what was happening. But I actually regretted that because I always say you can say what you mean and you can mean what you say, but you don't have to say it mean. And I said it mean. And here I'm trying to be the call-in queen, and I'm like chewing this guy out. No matter how much I thought he deserved it, I deserved not to do it that way. Because that's the paradox of calling in. The first person you have to call in is yourself.
So describe for us so we know what calling out is then. And it has to do with shaming. And you saw a lot of this, and you saw a lot of hate-filled speech. But I want you to take us back because, again, this whole technique developed over your life.
50 years.
50 years, and we can't talk about every story that impacted you, but the fact that you got a call one day from an American Nazi leader who sort of wants to come in from the cold, and you took that call and you ended up being his handler to get him back into mainstream, decent society. That's unbelievable to me. So tell us what happened in a nutshell. Sorry about that.
Did you just hear me cuss another white guy out? Anyway. In the 1990s, I was working at what was called the National Anti-Klan Network, renamed the Center for Democratic Renewal. And my boss then was Reverend C.T. Vivian, who'd been an aide to Dr. Martin Luther King. And Reverend Vivian always said that when you ask people to give up hate, then you need to be there for them when they do. I didn't relate to none of that, because I frankly felt that if the Klan hated me, I was all right hating the MAC. I mean, hating the Klan is the one privilege a black woman has in America, right? But then I got this call from this man, really deep bass voice. Hello, can I speak to Leonard Zeskin? Leonard, who just died a month ago, April 15th, was my mentor, and he was our research director. So normally I took a message, because he wasn't even in the office. Can I speak to Leonard Zeskin? I need to take a message. Who's calling? And he said, Floyd Cochran. And before I could catch myself, I said, the Floyd Cochran? And it turns out that I recognized the name because he was the national spokesman for the Aryan Nations in Hayden Lake, Idaho. We monitored him. We wrote reports on him. I knew his name. And it turns out that Floyd had been kicked off of the compound by Pastor Richard Butler because his second son was born with a cleft palate. And his Nazi buddies told him that he was a genetic defect who needed to be culled. And Floyd was a little alarmed because as Nazis, they were all right hating, blacks, Jews, queers, all that. But when that hatred came home, that was like Floyd's alarm clock, because he never thought that hatred, kind of like a lot of Trump supporters now, would come back home. And so Pastor Butler kicked him off the compound. We were known for setting up informal witness protection programs for people who defected from the movement. So Floyd became my joy to partner with.
And just, do you feel, and you spent a lot of time with him, do you feel that you did make change with him?
Well, the thing that I want to be clear, when you talk about deprogramming, most of the time they have their own epiphanies before they reach out to you. They're not going to call you and say, please come help me leave the Klan. That's not how it works. They actually have something that makes them rethink, like Adam Grant says, rethink all of their life choices. And then they reach out for help because they can't figure out a path forward. So I've never heard anybody, except one or two people, say that they flip somebody. That doesn't actually how it works.
So let's pause there. Flip somebody. You make the point that it's really hard, and you shouldn't necessarily even aim to change somebody's mind. Tell us why not.
Because it doesn't work. People don't like being told what to think. They don't like manipulation. And basically, when you try to correct somebody's path, what they feel is that you're telling them that they're too stupid to think for themselves. And so their hearing is going to shut down because they're feeling like you're calling them stupid. And so that's why we don't have those magic words. What we do with calling in is that we make an offer to give them effective, respectful, active listening to the story of how they got there, or what they think, how they got to think what they do. But we don't call them out or try to shame them. And one of the key ingredients is people only believe information from people that they trust, who they trust. And so one of the preconditions is to establish your trustworthiness if you want to effectively communicate with someone who doesn't think like you.
So, and you call yourself it's not often used domestically, it's usually internationally, but you're a human rights activist. That's what you call yourself. Mm-hmm. So already you're telling me You can't do this work overnight, and yet we're in a situation now that I think all of us would agree, wherever you stand, that things feel very urgent. There's no time to waste. And in fact, we just heard, again, whatever your particular positions are, we heard Bob Woodward say that he learned directly from General Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under Trump. He said Trump is fascist to the core. Well, if that's true, and he's fascist to the core, how much time do people who believe he's a direct threat to this country now, how much time do they have to build trust with people who they don't have it with yet?
Well, Adrienne Marie Brown says that we have to move at the speed of trust, because you can't do anything without trust. So your sense of urgency will not be mitigated if you decide to move at a pace that doesn't work for you to build the power to reduce the to overwhelm the fascists and stuff. I mean, as you know, Michael, the course I teach, started teaching, in 2017, is called White Supremacy in the Age of Trump. And I've done that at, 4 or 5 colleges now. So it's not that I don't recognize the threat. I'm an anti-fascist teacher. But I find that the methods we've used to fight fascism in the United States have been startlingly ineffective, because we're too busy calling people out instead of calling them in. We're letting the people who don't perfectly align up with us on what pronoun to use and what book to read and what dead white man to quote, we drive them away. And that's not the way to stop the human rights violations of the fascists. So I'm no less devoted to fighting fascism. I just don't want us to keep making the same mistakes. I'm ready for some new mistakes. The same old mistakes are getting on my nerves.
And tell me about the name of that class, because now we're in a situation, if the federal government decided a class with the title White Supremacy in the Age of Trump, that sounds like it's ripe for some pressure on the administration of Smith College if they discover that class.
They already know about it.
Who's they? Who
Well,
already
first
knows?
of all, there's a right-wing rag, I could call it a magazine, newspaper called Campus Reform, that has already done an expose on my class, and that was 4 years ago. In December of this past year, Charlie Kirk with Turning Point USA, got in touch with one of my agents and said, I want to debate Loretta Ross on abortion. And I was like, oh, try again, you little poop butt. I mean, I don't debate them. And back when I did that anti-fascist work, I would go on all the right-wing talk shows, the Foxes, I did that because that was my job. But what I've also discovered in that work is that no matter what you say, they're going to lie about it. So why even give them the satisfaction of having your words to distort? I don't play that media game with those fascists anymore.
So in terms of this idea of making change with those you'd rather cancel, there's a certain line where it's like, it's for you, and for many people, it's not worth it. Don't even waste your breath. And how do you know when it's not worth wasting your breath? Because you got a guy like Floyd Cochran sitting out there somewhere.
There's a difference between the puppets and the puppeteers. I call out and cancel the puppeteers, the people who are intentionally hateful, intentionally cruel, are manipulating their followers' pain to power and money. I ain't got no problems calling them out. But I am going to give the puppets the benefit of the doubt, because their pain is real, even if their solutions are bad. And you have to learn the distinction between the two. Like I said, I'm an expert on fascism, so for me it's a lot easier because I've been doing this for 30 years. It may be a lot harder for someone who's new to it, but still, what do you lose by giving people the benefit of the doubt until you have more information that you can then make up your mind about them? Our problem is that we want to shortcut everything and affix a label to people that's convenient for us, but it doesn't allow any nuance. So if somebody says something that we read as racist or transphobic or whatever, we just get into dismissing them without allowing for the fact that we're basically talking about cultural illiteracy. In most of these instances, we are in a whole society where we don't teach about white supremacy or fascism or racism. We don't teach this stuff, and yet we want to hold people responsible for not knowing it. You know, and so it's to our benefit to give people the benefit of the doubt until you ask the questions. And in my book, I talk about, you know, my favorite phrase in my book is, tell me more. You know, so you said something, instead of saying, you should never have said that, why not just call yourself in first, calm down, and say, you know, that's an interesting perspective right there. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about what you've been through that helps me understand how you got there? You always want to offer an invitation for conversation instead of a fight.
That's so interesting. You know, there's a time in my family where, remember this, I interviewed Carol Dweck, the author of Mindset.
Right.
The Growth Mindset.
Fix and growth,
and
right.
And she says, it takes practice. I said, you know, my kids were young at the time. I said, how can I give my kids the growth mindset, that sense that they can overcome failure and that, you know, challenges are good? She said, well, why don't you tonight go home and at dinner time ask your kids, what good challenges did you face at school today? And I followed her advice. It's true. And I went home and I said, so kids, what good, tough challenges did you face at school today? And the answer was, who did you interview today, Dad? True story. And so that brings me back to the serious question, which is, it's got to sound like it's really natural. If you suddenly change your vocabulary, it's like, whoa, what are you, you're trying to play me?
But calling in is in all of us. We automatically already do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, the first step of calling in is to put yourself on pause. Everyone who's ever parented a child knows how to put themselves on pause. Because if you blurt out the first thing that's in your mind when your children come at you stupid, they'll be in therapy for life. So we already self-regulate. We don't blurt out the first, our actual opinions about a bad boss. We know it would get us fired. You know, so we already know how to self-regulate in specific situations. I just want us to use that technique more universally with the person who cuts us off, and instead of getting into road rage, put yourself on pause. Instead of cursing out the person at the DMV, put yourself on pause, you know, and then do a self-assessment and then ask, is it even worth letting this person that just got on my nerves have the remote control to my emotions today and ruin my day? Is it even worth that?
So let me ask you, let's deal with one of the toughest. I feel comfortable asking you about the toughest questions that would cause us, you know, if anybody else, enormous anxiety even to think about it. But the Israel-Gaza situation, where many people view, and in some cases rightfully so, certain binaries. You're not a big fan of binaries, but sometimes people feel, look, there is a definite right and a definite wrong, and you can't squish the language around to hide that. What's happening on your campus? What have you experienced with the Israel-Gaza protests, and how have you handled it as a professor?
Well, I'm fortunate to be at Smith College. I also have an appointment at Yale, but I don't get involved in their politics because I'm tenured at Smith. Well, I mean, you got to pay attention to your real boss, right? The good news at Smith is that we have a very smart president, Sarah Willie LeBreton. And instead of, when the protests erupted on our campus, the first thing she did was go out there and talk to them. As a matter of fact, they were planning a march on her house, because, you know, every campus, they give the president a house to live in, right? And she went outside and talked to them and said, listen, I don't mind you protesting, but I also do mind you, you know, terrorizing my family. Do y'all mind protesting at the administrative building where I work? And that's what they did. They redirected the march to the administration building because she respected them. She talked to them. Then when they took over the administration building, she didn't make a big deal of it. She moved all the staff out of it, found other offices. And her approach was so engaging that those kids left the building cleaner than when they found it. They had watered the plants, washed dishes. I mean, so.
Is that true?
This is an actual true story. You know, and so that's the bit of it. But now back to my classes. As I said, I teach a course called White Supremacy in the Age of Trump. So it's normal for me to talk about the components of white supremacy, the fascism, the racism, the misogyny, the Christian nationalism, the Islamophobia, all of those things I'm teaching every day. So my class became a safe place to talk about all of these things because it wasn't exceptional to teach. So by October 7th, I was already into talking about Deborah Lipstat's work and Holocaust denial, which is accompanied with anti-Muslim stuff. And so when you routinize talking about this stuff, it becomes so much easier to build a safe container for everybody to participate in it without demonizing the other. And so one of the things that I encouraged my school to do was to teach the people who didn't have to deal with this stuff on a routine basis how to include it in their educational systems, in whatever they were teaching on their syllabus. And so we had a lot of faculty development around that.
Gotcha.
And then when the students rightfully demanded that we divest from Israel, the president brought in our chief financial officer to explain how all our divestments work. We all got an education in our what's that thing called?
Portfolio.
Portfolio
The endowment.
And so
the conclusion there was, what did they conclude after
first of all,
explaining it?
you know what I would say? We have too many college administrators who are afraid of 18-year-olds. And I keep asking, who's the adult in this situation? It is a student's human right to protest. If they're not protesting Israel, Gaza, they're going to be protesting serving too much chicken in the cafeteria. This is what students do. So why are we always surprised? You know, aren't we supposed to be the experts at handling and growing up 18-year-olds?
Have students left your class and missed your class to protest?
Well, now you ask me to get in trouble. No one has missed my class to protest, to be honest. But I did end a class 5 minutes early when a protest was happening.
Would you have,
So I'll just say that, right?
would you have canceled the class entirely for the protest?
No.
Why not?
Huh? Well, because they paid close to $80,000 to get an education. You know, they can remain stupid for free. So it's my job to offer that education. It's their choice about whether they're going to show up for class. But I think that would be an abandonment of my responsibility as an educator if it had conflicted with my class, but it didn't.
Let me ask you one more question before I open it up to questions from the audience. Boy, there's so much to ask you. I do want to know if you can recommend, because you are always reading, as you said the other night. You are a voracious reader. I was in your house. You have 3 separate libraries, one devoted to science fiction, and that must help your imagination. You need to have a great imagination to call people in. Are there any books you've come across the past few years that you think, this is a good book, all-purpose, for calling in piece of fiction especially, because one of our authors the other day said, you know, fiction is a great device for creating empathy, even more so than learning about it from nonfiction sources. Anything fiction or nonfiction that you would recommend?
Well, nonfiction, I just discovered Viktor Frankl's book, The Search for Meaning, 2 years ago, even though it came out in the 50s, but you know, they didn't offer that in my education in Texas. What can I say? And I majored in chemistry and physics, so I wasn't into the humanities so much, so maybe I would have gotten it if I'd majored in political science or something, but I'm a STEM girl. So that was a surprise to me, and it stuck with me so much that I just had to read it over and over again. And from that, I learned the urgency and necessity of hope as a survival strategy. Now, in nonfiction, I haven't read any nonfiction since I...
Wait, nonfiction or fiction?
I mean, fiction. I haven't read any fiction maybe in 4 or 5 years because I've just been too busy trying to keep up with the nonfiction. But since I love science fiction, one of my favorite authors is named Lois McMaster Bujold. And what she's noted for is having a protagonist who's disabled. And you don't get to see a lot of disabled people as the heroes of military sci-fi conducting space battles like Star Wars and stuff. But she wrote a line that I put in my book, I think, and I certainly put it in my speeches. She says that too many people worry about their reputations trying to control what other people think about you. But they're always going to see you through the lens of what they've been through, not the lens of what you've been through. So what you need to worry about is your integrity, because only you know when you're compromising your values, when you're not living up to your high expectations of yourself, when you need to make decisions that you can look in the eye without shame. And so, even though it's militaristic sci-fi, I love those nuggets, those pearls of wisdom, like Octavia Butler and all of that, who predicted the times that we're in. You know, I love the wisdom that, if good science fiction predicts accurately where we are. I mean, do y'all remember reading Dick Tracy cartoons? And now we're talking to our wrists? I'm like, and I'm so ready for the transporter. Beam me up, Scotty. I'm tired of airplanes. You know, all of this stuff.
Let me open it up to questions. Yes, Sarah.
Professor Ross, thank you so much for being here with us. You have been one of my most anticipated sessions because I desperately need it. I vote, even in the small elections. I donate, I phone bank, I protest, I march, I post, I write letters. I am doing everything. While phone banking for Harris Wall's campaign, I was assigned to first Nevada, then North Carolina. I'm pretty sure I talked to a KKK member at one point. And I tried to meet him where he was, and I couldn't get through. I now realize I should have said, "Tell me how you got here, sir." Is there anything more that I can do? What is the most effective thing I can do?
I just want us all to realize that though we may have been too young to do those lunch counter sit-ins in the 1950s, this is our lunch counter moment. You know, and we need to appreciate that right now. So it's a wonderful time to be alive, to recognize that all the good history hasn't passed you by. You can still make an impact now. So what you could do should always be based on what's your capacity to do. But I've invented a concept that I call appropriate whiteness that I'm really fond of, that I put in the book. And the reason I invented this concept was in my anti-Klan days. I would parachute into a town that just had a hate crime or a Klan march, Nazi march, whatever. And the town was traumatized, always. And the Klan, they only choose all white towns to do this. And you notice they don't come to the hood. They don't. They stay the whitest town in the world. So here I am showing up, not even know which white person is in the Klan, which one ain't. You know, that's where I am. But I created this concept because there'd be 3 groups of white people. There'd be the first group, usually was the smallest group, and that was what we call the anti-racist whites. They were the ones that wanted to punch a Nazi. You know, the testosterone-filled boys, and I don't care how old they are, they're acting like teenage boys, you know, who want to go out here and, you know, actually fight the Klan, physically fight them. They never realized how that looked, though. Because when you got 200 anti-fascists beating up on 6 Klansmen, really bad optics here. You made the Klan look like the victims. The second group, which was the largest, were what I'd call the ostrich people. They would basically say, let me just bury my head in the sand, let me board up the downtown windows. We don't want to give them any attention because that's what they want anyway. So we'll just pretend this is not happening. In a couple of days, it'll be gone, it'll be over, and we can go back to business as usual. That was predictable. But the third group was the most interesting one. They said, we don't want the violence, we believe in nonviolence, but we're also not going to ignore this hatred. Because there was a reason they chose our community. They thought our community was a good place for them to organize. For those people, I created the concept of appropriate whiteness. Give you an example. Y'all remember when those 2 black men were racially profiled at the Starbucks in Philadelphia? Do y'all know why you know the story? Because a white woman said, I'm probably not going to get arrested. Let me film this and put this on the internet because this injustice is not going to happen in my name. That's an example of appropriate whiteness. In repurposing your privilege against white supremacy. It was probably a Karen that called the cop, and it was the anti-Karen that said, oh, not in my name, kind of thing. So this is something we all can do.
Let me open up one more question. I think we have time for it.
I'm sorry, I'm going on.
No, that's okay, because I have a way for you to ask a lot of questions after this next question outside of this format. So does anybody else? Yes. Hold on one second, because he's going to race to you with the mic.
Bring a mic to you. I heard so many loud concerts, I'm slightly deaf right now. So.
Thank you.
But we have the best music.
Professor Ross, I'm a 20-year-old liberal arts college student who grew up abroad and is finding myself increasingly going on pause with the world and being frustrated with the lack of integrity intelligence that I see amongst people my age and those—
Use my phrase.
I was there yesterday.
Okay.
Do you have any advice for someone who wants to start calling in small and just starting with people and just talking to them and understanding? Because sometimes it feels like it's one against a wall of people, and I'm not sure where to start.
Well, we have a saying from the civil rights movement: when the world feels like a mess, just start cleaning where you are, and that'll have an impact. So find the people you care about, have conversations with them, learn how to have constructive disagreement with people. And if you do it with people that you already care about and who already care about you, you will develop the capacity to then have these same kind of conversations with people you don't even know or care about. But we have to become competent in conflict. And that usually starts with the people who are invested in not hurting us. And we're invested in not hurting them.
Let me make a suggestion, because what we didn't get at and don't have time for right now is people who are in conflict with members of their family. They don't even want to go visit or have people into their homes, and they've tried to change minds, and it is very frustrating because you want to feel like my flesh and blood understands me. So I would like to just tell everybody, my email is michael@wavemaker.me. This stuff takes practice. If anyone there is motivated to say, I'm going to start where I am, and I'm going to try to take some small steps, and it's either working or it's not, send me your account. Loretta, will you agree? Loretta is so generous. She teaches these classes, these calling in sessions online, and do you know how much she charges for them? $5 for live sessions, because she wants everybody to be able to afford it. So, Loretta, if you will agree, I would like everybody to send in whatever stories you have to michael@wavemaker.me over the next year, and then when we gather here at this great book festival next year, we will find a way to distribute the insights to you. Loretta, does that sound okay?
That sounds great. And I do want to invite people. My website is my
Yes.
name. You can always sign up. Like I said, $5, the cost of a cup of coffee. You can learn how to have these hard conversations with friends, families, coworkers, all of those things. The whole session it's 4 sessions, so the whole package is $20. And if you sign up and you're like missed 2 sessions, then your $20 gets you the videotapes of what went on before. So anyway,
Loretta
I'm
Ross.
democratizing this stuff as best that I can, so thank y'all.
Loretta, thank you so much for your inspiration.